At dawn, long before the wealthy stirred, the streets were already alive with movement. The first to begin their work were the sanitation laborers, men tasked with removing the waste that accumulated in crowded urban environments. In cities like Florence and Venice, there was no modern sewage system. Waste from homes, workshops, and animals was often thrown into the streets or collected in open pits. It was the responsibility of these workers to clear it away before it became overwhelming. They worked with crude tools, wooden shovels, carts, and buckets, often with little protection. The stench was constant, the risk of disease ever present. They handled refuse that could carry infection, parasites, and decay. Yet their work was essential. Without them, the already fragile hygiene of Renaissance cities would have collapsed entirely. Their presence was largely ignored, their contribution taken for granted. Close behind them were the tanners, whose work transformed animal hides into leather. This was a vital industry, producing materials used for shoes, belts, armor, and countless other goods. But tanning was among the most unpleasant and hazardous professions in the Renaissance. The process required soaking hides in mixtures of water, lime, and often human or animal urine to loosen hair and flesh. Workers stood ankle-deep in these vats for hours, sometimes days, exposed to chemicals that burned the skin and produced overwhelming odors. The smell of a tannery was so foul that these workshops were often pushed to the edges of cities, yet even from a distance, their presence was unmistakable. Tanners suffered from chronic skin conditions, respiratory issues, and infections. Few could remain in the trade for long without lasting damage, yet demand for leather ensured that the work never stopped. Another essential but grueling job was that of the blacksmith. In the workshops scattered throughout Renaissance cities, blacksmiths labored over blazing forges, shaping metal into tools, nails, weapons, and hardware. Their work required strength, precision, and endurance. The heat was intense, especially during the summer months. Sparks flew constantly, and burns were common. The repetitive hammering took a toll on the body. Muscles strained, joints wore down, and hearing could be damaged over time. Still, the city depended on them. Without blacksmiths, construction would halt, agriculture would suffer, and even daily life would become more difficult. In the bustling markets, another kind of labor unfolded. Porters and carriers moved goods through narrow, crowded streets. These men hauled sacks of grain, barrels of wine, and crates of merchandise from docks to warehouses and shops. In port cities like Venice, this work was constant, driven by the flow of trade. The loads were heavy, often far beyond what would be considered safe today. Injuries were frequent: strained backs, crushed limbs, and exhaustion. There were no safety regulations, no guarantees of payment beyond the day's work. If a porter was injured, he was easily replaced. The city's economy moved forward regardless. Among the most dangerous jobs were those associated with construction. The Renaissance was a time of building. Cathedrals, palaces, and public works rose across Europe. Behind every magnificent structure were labourers who risked their lives daily. They worked at great heights without modern scaffolding or safety equipment. Falls were common and often fatal. Heavy stones were lifted using primitive pulleys, and accidents could crush workers instantly. Dust filled the air, damaging lungs over time. Yet these labourers remained anonymous, their names lost even as their work endured for centuries. Water carriers also played a crucial role in daily urban life. Without widespread plumbing, water had to be transported manually from wells, fountains, or rivers. This task often fell to the poorest workers, who carried heavy containers across long distances. The work was physically exhausting and repetitive. In hot weather, it became even more punishing. Yet clean water was essential for drinking, cooking, and basic hygiene. Without these carriers, daily life in Renaissance cities would have come to a standstill. Then there were the gravediggers, workers whose labour became most visible during times of crisis. Epidemics and outbreaks were frequent in the Renaissance, and when they struck, the demand for gravediggers surged dramatically. Their work was emotionally and physically taxing. They handled the dead, often in large numbers, sometimes without proper burial rites. During plagues, fear surrounded them. Many avoided contact, viewing them as both necessary and dangerous. Yet without them, cities would have faced even greater catastrophe.
In slaughterhouses, butchers performed another essential role. They processed animals to supply meat to urban populations, a task that was both physically demanding and deeply unpleasant. Blood, waste, and the constant threat of injury were part of daily life. The environment was chaotic, animals struggling, tools in constant motion, surfaces slick with blood. Cuts and infections were common. Still, the demand for food ensured that this work continued without pause. Women, too, were deeply involved in the labour that sustained Renaissance cities. Many worked in textile production, spinning, weaving, and dyeing fabrics. These tasks were often performed in cramped, poorly lit spaces, requiring long hours of repetitive motion. Others worked as domestic servants, responsible for cooking, cleaning, and maintaining households. Their labour was constant and undervalued, yet essential to the functioning of urban life. Some women also took on roles as midwives or caregivers, navigating the dangers of childbirth and illness with limited resources. Children were not exempt from this world of work. From a young age, they assisted in workshops, carried goods, or learned trades through apprenticeships. Their labour contributed directly to family survival. Childhood, as it is understood today, was a luxury few could afford. The brutality of these jobs was not just in the physical toll, but in their instability. There were no protections, no guarantees. Illness, injury, or economic downturn could erase a worker's livelihood overnight. Survival depended on constant effort, resilience, and often, luck. And yet, despite the hardship, these workers formed the backbone of Renaissance cities. Their labour made possible the achievements that history celebrates. The art, the architecture, the culture, all of it rested on the foundation they built with their hands. The Renaissance was not only an age of rebirth and brilliance, it was also an age of endurance. For every masterpiece created by figures like Leonardo da Vinci, there were countless unseen hands ensuring that the city around them continued to function. Their stories are quieter, less recorded, but no less important. The true lifeblood of Renaissance cities was not found in their monuments, but in their people. The workers who endured the hardest jobs, who faced risk and hardship each day, were the ones who kept the cities alive.